So yeah, I was just scrolling through random film sites, looking for cold open inspiration, and I came across this headline that Disney, by way of various subsidiaries, is putting out a 4-film collection of all the Indiana Jones movies on 4K Blu-ray. And apparently they've gone back into the sound mix, and Ben Burt, one of the original sound designers, famous guy in sound mixing, he's got a new sound mix for Dolby Atmos setups.
Oh, that's cool.
On this release. And Steven Spielberg has supervised the transfer from the film, so you're getting like the crispest, cleanest image, allegedly. It's good timing for me because I've just invested in a new 4K TV, so...
There you go. But you know what the problem with that is, though?
What's that?
The 4th Indiana Jones movie kind of sucked.
Oh, yeah. So it's...
So you're really paying for 4 movies when you're only going to watch 3.
Yeah, there's no pricing on this. I'd have to guess that it's going to be in like $100 Canadian, something like that, maybe a bit more. At least,
I would think so, yeah.
So
it's like the Criterion version of Indiana Jones.
Yeah, so, you're only getting really 3 watchable movies for the price of 4.
Were you like super disappointed by the 4th one? Because I kind of was.
Yeah, I think I was. I mean, I don't know if I really felt it in the moment, but you could tell that something was off. It did not have the snap of the original. There was a few too many old jokes. Harrison Ford kind of going grumpily, kind of limping around.
I like that. The old jokes, yes. Wasn't he like 70 when he did that movie?
Yeah, and he makes a big deal about it the whole time. And so the fact that they allegedly are getting him back for a 5th one is just bonkers to me. I don't know how that's going to work.
Doesn't matter. He's just going to get paid a lot. It's probably going to make quite a bit of money.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I know why he's doing it, but whether if we can move past whatever happened in that 4th one, they're going to have to bring some new blood in there.
It's kind of funny. Like, it's not like James Bond where you can recast Indiana Jones.
Yeah, because people have obviously tossed around the name Chris Pratt a whole bunch, but Chris Pratt and Harrison Ford have He's
got Jurassic Park. Yeah.
Exactly. And they deliberately kind of created a character for him in Jurassic Park that is kind of like Pratt's version of what Indiana Jones would be.
With dinosaurs? Actually, Indiana Jones and Harrison Ford with dinosaurs. I would watch that.
Yeah, actually, I would. So I don't know what the 5th one's going to bring, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to be getting this 4K release. The only thing that bums me out is like, the format wars are never over, and we're always in this cycle of like, if you like physical media, you just have to get used to refreshing your library constantly.
But I think, like, would it make a lot of sense to go from 4K to 8K though?
Really not. I mean, if you ask even like AV professionals, they'll tell you that movie theater screens, the ones that you go to, like allegedly the absolute pinnacle of movie watching technology, are only 4K.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're making 8K TVs at all is a little bit silly when you think that the resolution that they've kind of packed into the same size screen as you would have had with a 4K TV, you're not getting any more extra detail.
I can't imagine like the pressure that puts on makeup and costume people too.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Because like now you're nitpicking. Like, oh, there's a mark on his face, or there's something like this. There's a stitch that's wrong on the clothing. Like, you could nitpick this forever. I think there's a point where it stops making a difference. Welcome to the 92nd episode of the Extra Buttery Podcast, a free-flowing conversation between 2 guys who love film and TV. My name is Jason Chen, and I'm joined by Robert Snow. There's a lot to get to in this episode, so before we get to the Oscar chatter, let's start with a discussion about WandaVision. Did you like the finale? I really liked it.
I think you might have liked it more than I did. Not to say that I disliked it or that I was disappointed. I've not at all, but I think to me it just felt like your average season 1 finale of a series of this kind. So it didn't have any like major revelations or anything that really made me like, oh wow, I gotta come back for season 2. I'm still interested, but it wasn't a shocker by any means.
Will there be a season 2?
I can see them doing it. It is. I can see what you mean, where it's like they could or they couldn't.
This series leads right into Doctor Strange 2.
Right.
So if they do a season 2, maybe it would be after the events of whatever the next phase is.
I'd be fine with that because there's already too much TV to watch anyway. And
that's true.
American shows don't really do the thing that UK shows do, where they'll take like breaks of 2 to 3 years sometimes, just depending on whether, what the schedules of the actors are doing or whatever. So American TV loves to crank it out year after year after year until they kind of like bore the audience enough they drop off.
Or they jump the shark.
Yeah, or they jump the shark, and then everyone's just like, yeah, time to kill this thing. So I'd be 100% down for a Disney show to take a few years off and fit a few theatrical movies in the gap, if they wanted to.
I get where you're coming from. What I appreciate about WandaVision, the finale, was that I think it really hit a really nice emotional note. I think all the stuff that's happened to Wanda and all the things that they were teased in the first few episodes came to a good conclusion, to at least a satisfying conclusion. Too many shows, I think, try to end on cliffhangers and, they try to tease you a little bit more with what's coming. And granted, there's some of that in WandaVision. But as far as her sort of grief and her coping mechanism in regards to Vision, I think that was a very complete arc.
Yeah, and I can't remember what episode it was we left off on before we moved on to other topics here on the show. But I think at the time, the last time we talked about it, we were pretty convinced that the show was doing a really good job of laying everything out. It wasn't holding too much back in the style of like a Damon Lindelof or J.J. Abrams type production.
Well, that's because they don't know what to do with this material they have. So,
but it laid out the mysteries, and then it usually resolved the questions pretty soon afterwards, just enough to kind of tease you and keep you interested, but not drawing things out. And so then where we find ourselves in the finale is we know that the Vision that we've gotten familiar with over the course of the past 8 episodes, he can't exist beyond the walls of the Hex. And he's a product of her grief. There's that kind of really heart-wrenching moment where she creates the Hex for the first time. And this kind of insubstantial or Hex-based version of Vision is kind of born out of her. And that's what kind of kicks off the events of episode 1. So that's linking all that up together. Mm-hmm. But then it all has to kind of come home to roost in episode 9. And they're in a bit of a tricky spot because it doesn't seem like they want to fully make Wanda into a villain.
That's a good thing, though.
They go down that path a little bit, and obviously there's a long history of her being an anti-hero / sometimes villain in the comics. So they could have gone hard villain if they wanted to and have it be backed up by the source material. But they don't. They want to keep her the hero and keep her an Avenger and use her as a hero in future movies, obviously. So they have to it felt like they were doing a bit of dancing to kind of say, okay, we know that she did a bunch of terrible things and everyone in the town hates her, but we have to show that it really wasn't her fault. And a lot of it was Agatha Harkness. And there's got to be a final showdown between these two so that Wanda can sort of have a redemptive arc of some kind.
Yeah, I can see, though, Wanda being either an anti-hero or a villain in Doctor Strange 2. Because at the end of the episode, in episode 9, you see her reading that Book of the Dead, or whatever it is. The one with like the sacred, awful witchcraft. I would say that I think the biggest strength of that show is how Wanda grieves the death of her family, basically.
Right.
It's not so much that Agatha pushes her, it's that Wanda does this that ends up drawing Agatha's attention. Agatha, though, at some certain points does kind of become a mustache twirl villain.
Yeah, especially at the very beginning of the finale episode where she goes full witch mode and she's got the full, like, most witchy version of her outfit, and there's the purple and the wild hair and everything. I was like... It's
got a bit of like a hocus pocus thing, right?
Yeah, big time. So I didn't... I was kind of glad when they pushed past that a little bit. Granted, she stayed in that outfit for most of the episode, but I would kind of like, if Agatha is going to come back in subsequent appearances, wherever they are, I kind of hope that she gets a more modernized outfit, kind of like the one that Scarlet Witch does at the end of this episode.
Yeah, speaking of that outfit, Scarlet Witch's costume is easily top 5 in the MCU now. It is so nice.
It's a great blend of like the original designs from the comics, so it's got that kind of like retro vibe to it. It's got the history to it, but it's using all of the fancy layering materials and all the things that make the costumes of the current day Avengers look like something that are kind of grounded in real life. So it's not like the spandex and the simplified lines. It is very detailed and layered, and there's all sorts of different materials in it.
I think Elizabeth Olsen in an interview was saying that like that was actually like a big part of the discussion for WandaVision, because if you look at her in Avengers, all she does is wear a red leather jacket and show off some cleavage. Like there was no real like theme to her costume where everyone else had some functionality to it.
Sure.
So I'm glad they came up with something that actually looked spectacular. And I think she really nailed the Scarlet Witch role in this one. What was actually most surprising to me, though, was how successful and how well received it is. And I think we kind of touched on this in like our conversations before, but part of WandaVision's success, I think, is because they left so many breadcrumbs and Easter eggs for people to find. So it really took a life of its own on the internet. I can't remember another show that had a similar sort of effect other than Game of Thrones, but Game of Thrones had this like books and backstory that people could draw upon and draw theories on. WandaVision was more like, okay, what are we looking for phase 4 of the MCU?
Because it's a part of an ongoing continuity, I think people were very plugged in. It was the zeitgeist show. It just, however the zeitgeist gets determined, it's kind of a weird confluence of factors. But yeah, you're right. For a while, it was Game of Thrones, and people were trying to do their best to analyze why is the show of the moment Game of Thrones, until it wasn't, until the final season came out and people fled, in droves.
Yeah.
And then it became WandaVision, and and it carved out a spot. All the memes that you saw online were WandaVision related, especially in the heels of every new episode dropping. Also, too, because there hadn't been a new Avengers movie installment, partially because of the pandemic.
That's right.
People were kind of thirsting for a little bit of Avengers content, and so it really focused everyone's attention on this one thing, and especially like the nerdy ones out there, and incentivize them to sort of, all right, what can we learn from the comics, and what do we know about the movies that are planned for the future, and where does this all fit in?
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a bit of escapism too, right? Because as you said, we didn't get Black Widow, and we were all cooped up in our homes. But the most amazing thing to me was when the show first debuted, the first couple episodes were quite divisive because people thought it was rather boring.
Yeah.
Like they enjoyed the sort of the progression from, 50s TV to 90s TV.
Yeah.
But it didn't have a lot of substance in terms of story and character development. And then all of a sudden, wham, we just got hit with it. And because of this, Wanda actually vaults to the top of the Avengers list in terms of having a really fleshed out story. Like as fleshed out as Thor or Iron Man or Captain America. And you can't really say the same about the other characters, even when they have their own movies. Because
For sure.
WandaVision's theme and format was so unique to her.
And I think that's a function, too, of just the amount of screen time, When you think about the amount of screen time we have with the other main Avengers, they only have movies, which tend to be like 2 hours or so, if you add up all of their movie appearances in solo movies plus their handful of scenes in every Avengers movie, you probably still don't end up with as much screen time as Wanda gets over the course of 9 episodes.
Are you excited then for the Falcon and the Winter Soldier?
I don't know. I'm waiting for the buzz on that. I have a feeling like it may not be quite as twisty or quite as...
It definitely won't, right? There's no like mythical element to their characters, right? Because we've seen them so much in movies.
I'm sure because it's coming from the same minds at Marvel Entertainment, Marvel Studios, they will still be dropping breadcrumbs all over the place for linking it with the broader thing. But I think I'm going to reach the same spot as I am with Star Wars in the sense that there's just so much content coming out. Like for example, I'm not reading any of the Star Wars novels that are coming out or the Star Wars comics. I reached a point where I'm like, I can't consume it all and still have time for other things. So
I didn't even know there were books and comics coming out.
For Marvel, it's going to be the same thing where it's just like everyone's going to reach their own like internal limit of like how many of these things they can stay on top of. And unless people are saying that this other show is like the absolute hottest thing that you have to watch, I'm going to wait a long time before I circle back to it. What do you make of Spectrum / Monica Rambeau? Because I feel like they were gearing us up for a much bigger role for her in that finale. And I obviously like they've established that she has some powers, but she doesn't really have a grasp of them yet. And I'm curious to see if they keep her in the TV side of things or if she does eventually make her way into the movies.
So I think she does have a role in the future films. I'm not exactly sure, but I do believe at some point she's going to be involved with Captain Marvel.
Okay.
And I've read Captain Marvel is going to be in Thor 4, Love and Thunder.
Right.
And so I imagine that'll tie into it somehow. Keep in mind that WandaVision, I think a big part of its purpose is to set up Phase 4. So as much as I actually didn't really care for the Skrull appearance at the end of the episode, it does, I think, drive up a lot of interest for the future films. I do think that one of the things that they will talk about is because when they mention Captain Marvel to Monica Rambeau, she kind of has this like cold sort of reaction to it.
Yeah, it's implied that like she feels that
there's some sort of falling out.
There was a falling out, like Captain Marvel abandoned her family or something.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm interested to see how they explore that, because one of the biggest criticisms of the Captain Marvel movie was that it lacked a lot of emotional heart.
Yep.
So I wonder if this is a way to make up for that. But I mean, this is like beyond my knowledge of the comics. I knew about the Infinity War and all that and the Infinity Stones, but I don't know what they have planned for Phase 4. I really don't. I think this is a chance for them to go in a new direction, and I applaud them for it. But part of it is just being curious.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Do you want to get into the meat of the episode?
Yeah. We're going to talk about the Oscar nominations because we're recording this episode the day the nominations came out. We wanted to sync that up as much as possible, even though you may not be hearing this episode until later, the end of the month, for example. We're not entirely sure yet.
Yeah.
But regardless, the nominations are what they are. And I guess maybe the place to start was people love to talk about snubs. They love to talk about who got in, who got out. But I guess we could go into that detail, but maybe just off the top, was there any really big surprises for you?
I'm surprised Sound of Metal got so much attention, but I'm so happy.
Yeah, for sure. I'm also pleasantly surprised by that. I'm surprised that Mank is actually leading with the highest total number of nominations, even if it doesn't get very many in the grand scheme of things. Like
wins, you mean? Yeah.
I know you always like to say that, and I agree with this to a large part, that Hollywood loves telling stories about itself. It loves giving itself awards for depictions of itself.
Yes.
Very true. Bears itself out time and time again.
Yeah.
But I think in the case of Mank, it's just a little bit too highbrow, a little bit too insidery to really latch on. And it doesn't feel like Mank is really, even when it really came out, it didn't feel like it was commanding a lot of the conversation in the way that eventual Best Picture winners end up doing. So I think that's a bit of a red herring.
Do you think it's because of a lack of theatrical release, though?
Maybe a bit. But I think, like we were talking about when we originally covered it, like you have to be a very specific kind of classic movie buff, kind of like myself.
Yes.
And be very tolerant of David Fincher's indulgent references and the way he puts that thing together and all the old-fashioned tricks.
Right.
To really enjoy that movie, first of all, to actually come out of it and be like, yeah, I want to watch that again sometime. Right. If we know how fickle the Oscar voting blocks are, I mean, it's hard to get even really good movies to kind of penetrate that wall. So I feel like this is one of these cases where the nominations are a sort of honorable mention.
The two other big surprises for me, one I'm not so surprised with, and that's with the Five Bloods. It basically got no attention. I get why. I think Spike Lee is a very controversial director sometimes. I think Hollywood doesn't appreciate how critical he is. And I think people forget about this film because it was released so early and on streaming. And it dealt with a lot of politics that I think, especially after The Green Book, that I think Hollywood wanted to avoid. Because it had a character, Delroy Lindo, first of all, got snubbed. He was a black person who supported Trump in the movie, the character, I should say. And I thought he was fantastic, but he's nowhere to be found.
Yeah. And it's funny, too, because they talked to Spike a couple of days ago. I can't remember which outlet it was. And they were asking him, like, do you anticipate any nominations? Do you think The Five Bloods is going to actually pick anything up? And he seemed kind of prepared for the fact that it wasn't. He kind of took the tone that, like, first of all, awards don't matter a whole lot to him anyway. But he said that he referenced Green Book in his comments, but he also pointed out that he was glad that it seemed like movies like Minari and Nomadland that had significant non-white casts or people behind the camera were getting more love this year. So he was like, I don't really mind if my own movie doesn't get a lot of attention, but it from his perspective, it did seem that, it may not be him, but there are other people who are getting their due. So.
Well, I mean, all these guys are like, oh, awards don't matter until they win. Then they're like, oh, yeah, awards are great.
Yeah. He was right in predicting that there was a lot of non-white representation in this year's awards. And a lot of the headlines that popping up on like the major news sites were pointing out like highest number of nominations for non-white actors. There were 2 women in the Best Director category. Clearly, some of the changes that the Academy has been trying to do in terms of their voters may be working. I don't know.
This is not affirmative action to me. I think all the nominees who got nominated were very diverse.
Oh, yeah. No, totally. Yeah.
I don't think there were any like brownie nominations handed out. I'm looking at these nominations and I think there are some surprises, but there's nothing egregious to me.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
Yeah. And the other surprise, my second one, and you probably guessed this too, is Thomas Vinterberg.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think he's going to win it, but
no, he's definitely not going to win. But the fact that Another Round got some attention really surprised me, especially in Best Director.
Yeah.
And just thinking about the movie, like it is really well put together. And if you haven't seen it, it's hard to track down because it's a foreign film, it's Danish, but I highly, highly recommend it.
So do you want to go through the categories in a little bit more like granular kind of detail?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Should we start with Best Picture?
Of course.
King of the Heap.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm proud of myself. There's only one movie on this list that I haven't seen yet.
The Father?
The Father, yeah.
That one's hard to track down. I tried to catch that one at VIF, but that was sold out really quickly.
Yeah, I feel like it'll be, if it's not available now in some kind of rental status, then it might be soon.
It should be. Like, you would hope so, right? Like, there's nothing I hate more than the Oscars naming a Best Picture that no one's seen.
Yeah.
Like, I get that they don't, skew towards a blockbuster, but it needs to be a movie that people have seen. And I think that's what actually hurt First Cow.
Yeah.
It garnered a lot of buzz and awards talk, and it got not completely, but it got shut out here. And I think it's because not many people saw it. I will say though, like the one sort of surprise in this for me is Promising Young Woman, partly just because I didn't find that film that enjoyable. I think all these films are fine and some of them are good, but there's no outstanding film among this list. And I wonder if it's a feature of just the year that we had, because everything got pushed back. A lot of films now are more about making, I think, sometimes a political statement than making something that's truly entertaining.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. I mean, I disagree that there's no outstanding things. I think Minari, Nomadland, and Sound of Metal are all outstanding choices for me. I'm not sure which one I would prefer out of all of them, but not quite yet. But I do see what you mean. Like it feels less like there are the real crowd pleasers in there. And Promising Young Woman, it dances a fine line between being this crowd pleaser in the sense that there's this black comedy satire thing in there, but it also has a bit of a very bitter kind of message as well.
Right.
And
yeah, fair.
And it rubs certain people the wrong way, and it's deliberately trying to kind of poke people in the eye a little bit. Uh-huh. And I've even seen some very interesting articles written by female critics who are talking about how they themselves strongly disagree with the overall message. What they're getting is the overall message from that.
Oh, okay.
So it's not a purely like one size fits all kind of movie, even for the populations that you would expect to be like, yeah, preach. So it is a weird one. And yeah, I see what you mean about it sticks out a little bit compared to the others.
Compared to last year, I thought last year's entries were far superior. I think Parasite, 1917, and, to a certain extent, even Jojo Rabbit I think beats a lot of the films on this list.
Yeah, I would say Parasite is definitely better than most things here. I agree with you on that. 1917 a little bit less because it, other than the way it was put together and shot, it was, for me, like it ended up being a pretty standard war movie.
Well, yeah, Dunkirk was way better, right? So, but if you go back to, I think 3 or 4 years ago, where we had, Shape of Water, Call Me by Your Name, Dunkirk, Phantom Thread, 3 Billboards, like that was a really strong year. I don't get the same sense here.
Yeah, I think I see what you mean. A lot of these feel like smaller movies that, and we sort of predicted this like 6 months ago to an extent. Like we knew that there was going to be a field of smaller movies or movies with smaller scopes, I guess you could describe it as. It doesn't have the kind of grand operatic Oscar movie kind of vibe.
Yeah, for sure. And I wonder if it's because a lot of companies are just not making, unless you have the Avengers IP or a Fast and Furious IP, like you just really don't have a budget to make that kind of film anyway.
Or there might be a lot of movies sitting on the shelf that people are waiting on, and they don't want to do the big theatrical rollout, and therefore the Oscar eligibility until they can actually make some money on the release.
Right. Did you have a snub for this category? Because I had one that I thought could have been nominated, and that was Ma Rainey's Black Bottom.
Yeah, I could see that going in here. I didn't enjoy Ma Rainey's Black Bottom as much, so I didn't personally want to necessarily consider it in here. But it would have made sense if it did pop up here, because obviously it's represented in some of the other categories.
There's also One Night in Miami, but I think we'll get to that later. But Regina King, I think, was more of a bigger snub.
Yeah, no, there's nothing really missing from Best Picture for me.
No Tenet?
No, I never really. It would have been nice to see it in the list because I enjoyed it as much as I did, but I also know that it had no chance whatsoever.
But because of the voting body, though, or because of the quality of the film itself? I think based on quality, I think it deserves consideration. I don't know how much it got.
Well, I like to see big, epic, sweeping things in Best Picture because I feel like
me too.
The category is a good kind of recognition of all the work that goes into making movies on that scale. But I know that because it's so genre heavy, it's just not something that the Academy would ever go for in a meaningful way. Again, you get back to that whole idea of like honorable mention, like a nomination is almost there. You kind of, if you can get the nomination, you can say like, oh yeah, okay, some Oscar attention, but not the real thing.
Best director.
This is an interesting one for me because I'm actually surprised to see Vinterberg on here. Me too. He's on here for another round. I've liked a lot of the movies that I've seen by him before, but I didn't anticipate him to pop all the way up here. I anticipated another round to definitely be in Best International Feature. So you could maybe make the argument that maybe he's taking the spot away from Regina King for One Night in Miami.
So sometimes it's hard to like describe what the criteria is, but I felt like another round, in terms of the way it was edited and the way it came together as a film, I thought it was really seamless, even though there's a lot of time jumps everywhere.
Okay.
So I think that's maybe where Vinterberg maybe got the edge, because I'm looking at these films, Minari, Promising Young Woman, No Man Land. There's some interesting, and Mank especially, there's some really interesting editing choices that they made, either thematically or, technically. This will be a hard category, but I feel like Chloe Zhao is probably going to get this.
Yeah, her name's been coming up the most in, and obviously like the DGA, the Directors Guild of America award will be the real bellwether for that. But yeah, I feel like she's definitely the front runner, followed pretty closely by Lee Isaac Chung.
Oh, okay. That, I don't know if he would have been my second pick, actually.
I wanted to root for Fincher, but again, going back to what I said about Mank, I really don't see it happening for him on this one.
Yeah, I feel like Fincher would probably be my second choice, just because of the things he's incorporated in that film.
And then Emerald Fennell, I think she's riding a bit of a wave of like the same kind of energy that got her the Best Picture nod, I think, too.
Yeah, just a lot of chatter in general, right?
A lot of chatter. It is a fun movie in some ways.
Is it fun? Would you describe Promising Young Woman as fun?
The satire bits are fun, and the sing along.
It's so dark though.
It is. The ending is very dark, but the sing along scenes and like the relationship montage stuff between Carey Mulligan and Bo Burnham.
Even though you knew it wasn't going to end well.
Her kind of winking to camera when things are when she's getting the edge over people and all of that. I feel like that's where the fun comes in. Obviously, it is a very serious topic otherwise. But I don't see her really bringing it home on this one. That would be quite an achievement too if she first time writer director.
Yeah, of course.
nailing the award, first time out.
Best actor, Riz Ahmed. I really like the fact that he got nominated, same with Steven Yeun.
Yep.
This is another hard one to pick. Not having seen The Father, but knowing the Academy loves Anthony Hopkins always, gives me a pause about who I think is going to win. The only guy I really can't see winning is Gary Oldman.
No. He won recently for Darkest Hour, so that always seems to be a bit of a predictor in a sense.
Very rarely do people win in consecutive years or even in close years.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that might affect Anthony Hopkins too, because he won for Silence of the Lambs.
But that was ages ago, though, right?
Any single win at any point in an actor's history kind of bumps down the likelihood a little bit.
Steven Yeun, I think, is a long shot too. I really feel like Chadwick Boseman's got this in the bag, though. It's just the feeling, you know, and he's getting a lot of chatter too.
Yeah, I feel like, unfortunately, Steven Yeun, the thing that he's got going against him is the fact that most of his dialogue is Korean. Even though the story is very American, I feel like there's a sort of unfair thing being held against him where...
Yeah, I was going to say that feels unfair, you know? I feel like you should get bonus points for being able to speak a second language in a film, right?
You would hope, like, you know, if it was a meritocracy for sure. But I feel like the folks in the acting body in the acting block who vote for this award, they just might, you know, they might go with a guy who's got dialogue in English, who also recently died, who was universally beloved, you know?
Right. Yeah, I think it's Boseman's to lose. Best Actress. This one was an interesting one too. This one's always hard to predict.
Same sort of breakdown actually as Best Actor. You've got previous winner Viola Davis in there.
Frances McDormand in there.
Frances McDormand is another previous winner, and for a recent movie too. So that, you know, as good as Nomadland is, and as central as McDormand is to that movie being good, like the movie is her, basically.
Did you see the United States versus Billie Holiday?
I did not. I mean, I love Billie Holiday's music, so I feel like I owe it to myself to watch this before the ceremony.
Yeah, every year there's always an actress who takes on a biopic or a historical character and just runs away with it. So I remember Renee Zellweger as Judy.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So, and the Renee Zellweger winning for Judy was a bit of a surprise, I think.
Yeah. So I'm looking at this, I'm like, I haven't seen the United States versus Billie Holiday, but Andra Day just kind of like pops out at me for some reason. Vanessa Kirby is in there because I think on the power of the first few moments of Pieces of Woman, like it's seared into your brain that it's so hard to forget, not to take anything away from her. But I would say Viola Davis, Andra Day, and Carey Mulligan are probably, for me, on the outside. Frances McDormand's Academy favorite. So I feel like, you know, maybe this is her again.
It's tight. I think it's down to Kirby and McDormand for me.
Okay.
And I haven't seen Pieces of a Woman yet, but I know that any kind of performance like what Kirby's doing there is, you know, that kind of absolutely searing, total, like, emotional destruction kind of thing.
I know, like, Hollywood loves women in, like, pure emotional distress.
Yeah.
Like, just completely collapsed on herself.
Yeah, it could be a bit stereotypical there. Not to take away from what Kirby's work, obviously, but...
Yeah, of course.
I feel like Promising Young Woman for Carey Mulligan, as much as I like Carey Mulligan, I feel like she's been robbed in previous years.
Oh, for sure. There's a makeup call in there somewhere, right?
I think Promising Young Woman is a little bit too genre, a little bit too...
What a political statement it would make, though.
Especially since she got a little bit of extra press when Variety printed a retraction to their review.
Did they retract? I thought they just apologized.
They sort of disavowed the review. They said that they threw the writer under the bus.
That was an interesting debate on its own, though.
Well, they were like, oh, he's not a staff writer. He's not actually representing Variety. He's a freelancer that we hired. And then that guy was left holding the bag.
I know. God, poor guy, whoever wrote that. I mean...
there was a few lines in there that were suspect, and like,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, you know, I don't want to absolve him of any, like, of all guilt, but
it is strange when a publication says, yeah, we don't believe in this guy's opinion anymore
after the fact that they publish it. You know?
Yeah.
So that always, you know, rubbed me the wrong way. You can't do something and then walk back on it. Like, you have to take responsibility for it, even if you disagree with it. How did it get through the editorial process?
Yeah, and that comes up with like editorial columns in newspapers a lot, but especially when you're dealing like with a review of a subjective piece of art criticism. Yeah, it's even weirder. So anyway,
Best Supporting Actor. This one is interesting too. This one might be the most interesting category.
Yeah, well, and the headline here is the fact that Lakeith Stanfield and Daniel Kaluuya are both nominated for the same movie.
I know.
Bizarre.
But, you know, when we talked about this, I mentioned that Lakeith Stanfield I thought was way better than Kaluuya and deserves some talk. So I'm happy to see his name here. But a lot of people thought like it was a big surprise. Is it more because of his performance, or is it because they both showed up in the same category?
I think it's the latter, because people feel that by running two actors in the same movie in the same category, by doing that, you hurt both of their chances a lot. Because people already have a hard time remembering everything that's nominated when they go to cast their votes. And if they're like, I think I saw that movie, and and then they're trying to like weigh the two performances in that same one, I think it's going to have an impact on which of them wins. In fact, I think it's going to kill it for both of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. Too much of a vote split, right?
So then that leaves, you were feeling Sacha Baron Cohen for something this time around.
Yeah, it was this one, Trial of the Chicago 7. I think he has a really good chance. The outside dark horse I would pick is Paul Raci, because we both loved him so much in Sound of Metal.
Yeah.
And I could see so much of a vote split in this. I could see people saying, I didn't like Chicago 7, or I didn't like Sacha Baron Cohen because he's this comedian that's all of a sudden a serious actor, and Hollywood doesn't like that.
Yep.
Leslie Odom, I felt, didn't stand out from the rest of the cast in One Night in Miami. I thought everyone was good in that one. So that was a little curious.
I would have put Kingsley Ben-Adir ahead of Leslie Odom Jr. from that movie.
Right. But maybe because Sam Cooke had more of a emotional arc in that movie. Maybe that's why.
I'm throwing my hat in the ring for Paul Raci. I feel like he's my favorite.
Yeah, me too. But if you had to pick though, like, we'll make our picks like sooner to the awards ceremony, but do you have a front runner other than Raci, who's your personal choice? But who do you think the Academy goes with?
I think the Academy goes with Sacha Baron Cohen.
I think that would be a nice political statement for them.
Especially if he doesn't end up getting anything for Borat in the screenplay.
Yeah, which actually is a good seg into our next category, Best Supporting Actress. Explain this to me, Rob. How does Glenn Close in Hillbilly Elegy get nominated for a Raspberry and Best Supporting Actress?
I have no idea. I don't know what's happening with that movie.
How do you get nominated for both Worst Performance of the Year and Best Performance of the Year?
I really don't know. I feel like maybe Glenn Close's management just has a really, really good ground game when it comes to,
Guess so.
Sprinkling her name in all of the, because they both take out, if you're trying to get an award for your client, you'll take out for your consideration ads in all the major publications. If you're really going gonzo, you'll start buying billboards and ads and stuff on TV. So yeah, maybe she just has this kind of solid core of support. They figured
she is the one that really stands out to me. I don't think Amanda Seyfried has much of a chance. I didn't think her role in Mank was that substantial, nor did she really stand out.
No.
I know Yoon Yeon-jun in Minari is getting a lot of buzz, but I didn't find her performance that poignant or that strong. So that to me leaves Olivia Colman and Maria Bakalova. Now, Maria Bakalova winning wouldn't be, out of the ordinary. I think we've seen some like surprise winners in this category, because traditionally this category has always been kind of wide open. There's always like only 2 or 3 in the front. But I don't know. What are your thoughts about, a first-time actress, foreign actress in a comedy winning Best Actress or Best Supporting Actress, I would say?
If she wasn't on this list, I would say that Yoo Jung-yoon would be my favorite for this, because I know that these categories, supporting categories, often go to people who are not new to acting, but they, maybe in like in Yoon Yoo-jung's case, they've been working for decades, and then they come to Hollywood for this, starry movie that broke through in a different market. So the award has gone to people like that before, and maybe then they disappear from Hollywood and you don't see them again.
Yeah.
So they just have this brief moment in the sun. So I feel like Bakalova and Yoo Jung-yoon that's similar stories in that case. So I think they're kind of equally weighted for me.
I don't know if you remember, but there was a movie back then called Maria Full of Grace. Do you remember this?
I've heard the title, but I don't think I've seen it. Or
Maria Full of Grace was a Spanish film, and it was about a woman who becomes a drug mule, and the lead actress is a woman by the name of Catalina Sandino Moreno, and she was nominated for Best Actress at the one of the Academy Awards. I can't remember which year. This would have been early to mid 2000s, and there was talk that sometimes the Academy has this refusal to award winners that people don't know anything about,
right?
Because it somehow lessens the profile of the category. It's always the danger when you say, for example, First Cow or Sound of Metal, where a best picture that nobody's seen wins.
It's the worst thing. I mean, at the end of the day, you do have to kind of like accept the fact that the Oscars are a form of entertainment of their own. Like the Academy depends on viewership of the show to really to make money and to keep people entertained. And if your fans watching at home or watching the ceremony are seeing an award get announced and they're like, everyone's response is, who?
That's right.
I mean, that's a bit of a problem, It hurts your audience engagement a bit.
Yeah.
So should we do animated feature or one of the screenplays?
Let's do screenplays.
So for adapted screenplay, we've got Borat 2, The Father, Nomadland, One Night in Miami, The White Tiger.
I told you Borat would somehow show up in this, man.
Yeah. And now at the time you were saying that, I didn't fully see it, but now it's kind of settled in. I'm like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. I mean, just to take a character that was like a big joke and all of a sudden turn it into this hugely relevant political figure and political commentary is quite something.
Yeah.
And, just the fact that he was able to make this movie is quite an accomplishment in itself.
Yeah, for sure. And even in subsequent weeks, like long after the election and all of that, more and more stories have come out about like the hell that he put himself through to make this thing.
Usually the best picture and the best screenplay are kind of like two sides of the same coin. Borat might have a chance in this because all the other films or The Father and Nomadland, I should say, have been nominated for best picture. So if one of those two win, then I don't think they'll win this category. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think I know what you mean. I mean, the Nomadland is interesting in the sense that it is adapted from a book and a magazine article, and it has a lot of this kind of documentary realness to it, and a lot of the actors in it who are not Frances McDormand or David Strathairn are just real life nomads playing versions of themselves. Mm-hmm. So that's a kind of an interesting detail that I'm not exactly sure how it will affect the race, but for original screenplay, then we've got Judas and the Black Messiah, Minari, Promising Young Woman, Sound of Metal, and Trial of the Chicago 7.
Is this going to be the one where it's like, if you don't win Best Picture, maybe you win this one?
Yeah.
I love Judas and the Black Messiah because of the way it played with the time. Minari was interesting because it had a very unique point of view, something that we hadn't seen before. Sound of Metal was interesting because of how it incorporated sound. Trial of Chicago 7 is just a very Aaron Sorkin thing. Like, it's solid, but I don't think it was anything spectacular or special.
I think Trial of the Chicago 7 is the crowd pleaser pick, but I feel like it sort of reminds me of supporting actor in a way, because you've got Trial of the Chicago 7 and Judas and the Black Messiah, which are about similar topics happening around the same period of time, sharing some characters. So they may actually split the vote a little bit on that.
True. Good point.
Which leads me to think that Minari might run up the center and take it, especially if Minari doesn't win Best Picture and Nomadland does instead.
You don't think Sound of Metal has a chance here?
I mean, I'm rooting for it, but I feel like Sound of Metal may pick up more in the production categories.
Maybe Sound of Metal doesn't take enough risks.
I don't know. I think it takes risks in topic and in execution, but I don't think if we're talking screenplay, I think Minari is the kind of thing that Minari or Trial of the Chicago 7 are the kind of things that might connect with people a little bit more because it's ensemble pieces with kind of heartwarming.
Right. I just feel like Minari, to me, certain parts of the film, or actually big parts of the film, feel very straightforward. I don't think storytelling wise it does anything special. It's a very well told story, but just not quite like Judas and the Black Messiah or even Promising Young Woman.
So that about does it for like the quote unquote major categories. There's plenty of other ones. I feel like, in best, is this the first year that they've folded together sound editing and sound mixing into one best sound category?
That's a good question. I should ask you.
Because that's just, I'm pretty sure that it's just the one category this year, and I feel like that wasn't the case last year. So they finally admitted that, like I was saying before, for the average viewer at home who wasn't able to distinguish between editing and mixing, they were like, yes, screw it.
Yeah, that's right.
So then all the editors and all the mixers are like, oh, we're all competing for the same thing now. Not that it matters that much, but I feel like that is an example of like Sound of Metal going to get something in there maybe. Score, I don't have any opinions on. Same thing with song.
The best documentary, best shorts, those ones are, I haven't seen, basically 90% of them, so I can't really comment on it.
Yeah.
But I do like the ones about best cinematography. So actually we talked about this too, how Judas and the Black Messiah looked fantastic. But I feel like it's Mank or No Man Land for this one.
Yeah, for sure. No Man Land has got that kind of loose
natural light
documentary style. Mank is very formal or recreating a very formal specific style. So they're kind of the most in your face when it comes to cinematography, and I feel like that being in your face with a particular style is very important to securing that award. Same thing with editing. That Sound of Metal might actually come up in that category too, because editing is so important to the way that thing works. Promising Young Woman too, there's an extent to which editing could be a strength for it there.
Yeah, so exactly. That's why I was talking about Promising Young Woman in the screenplay category, because I think it does take risks and it does pull them off. I feel like No Man Land, because a movie like that, if you don't cut it carefully, it's going to be a really bad film.
And the other thing we've seen too often is that editing and cinematography can sometimes sort of ride the wave with the Best Picture winner. So like whatever people have decided is the movie of the year, editing and cinematography kind of echo it, follow it. So yeah, Nomadland might clean that up just because it's been picked as the one that's the top this time around.
Right. I know you don't really particularly like these categories, but best production design.
No, I like production design, and I this is where I'm rooting for Tenet. It's on.
Well, I was gonna say
it's on there for one, so I might as well cheer for it.
But I mean, of all the other films, like Tenet on scale alone beats everyone else.
Oh yeah, especially in this category because it doesn't work unless. That movie doesn't work unless they've thought through all of these really complicated sequences and they've dreamed up this whole mythology around the time concept in the story. So
I can't imagine the sort of logistics of having to film something blow up and then having to edit it in like reverse, and
then coming up with like the cost, like costuming is its own category, but
but you know how like they had the blue and the red room,
there's huge sets and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't see, I mean, all the other sets were great, don't get me wrong, but I always in this category tend to lean towards sets that are big, that give you a really grand sense of scale.
Nolan crashes a 747 into a hangar. Like that is production design to a T.
Yeah. That sequence is actually, I think, one of the better ones. The heist in the airport.
Yeah.
Best costume design. This is I always like these ones because I always think that every nominee is fantastic and really, really well deserved. But these ones tend to go towards period films, I feel like. Emma really like jumps out at me.
Yeah, I feel like the period stuff, you're very right. Like costume design really goes to that because you know, it's really dependent on research and getting the period details right. And
including material, and making it look good on screen too.
Oh yeah, that's a challenge too. And so from that perspective, Mank is also probably a strong contender because they, even though it's more recent in terms of like chronological history, they still had to correctly echo a period of time that people are actually able to go back and watch because they can see the movies that came out in the 30s and kind of go side by side.
And it wasn't color corrected after filming, right? Like they didn't convert it black and white after filming in color.
I'm not sure what the workflow was if he, because some cameras can be set to shoot in black and white when they shoot, but that can kind of
right. But the color of your costume has to change too, right?
Yeah, because there are different levels of gray. It sounds weird, but like you do often have to think about if you know that you're going to be releasing your movie in black and white, you have to think about the colors of the costume so that you get the right shades of gray.
Exactly. Yeah. This is not Zack Snyder where you're filming everything in full color and then turn it into grayscale, basically. There's a lot of thought that it's like people are thinking like, oh, black and white, that must be easy. No, it's much harder.
Yeah, you don't want your actors to just be this like formless mass on the screen or whatever.
Best makeup and hairstyling. So Hillbilly Elegy is in this, and I saw the trailer and I kind of refused to watch this movie, but anytime they ugly up an actress, They always get nominated, and I don't know. I just don't know why Hillbilly Elegy is even getting the attention it is.
Yeah, I'm just as mystified as you. I don't have a good explanation, and
Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, I feel like it has good production value, but I feel like the degree of difficulty in Emma and Mank and even Pinocchio is much higher.
Like the character of Ma Rainey specifically, makeup is a huge deal because they're trying to get her specific look perfect. And the other actors are less made up visibly, but obviously they were trying to recreate this like blisteringly hot recording studio. So there are probably some techniques in there that might be worthy of attention.
Just to kind of wrap it up, this is the one year where obviously I disagree with some of the decisions, but there's nothing like the Green Book. There's nothing that really frustrates me to no end or makes me really angry. Obviously, there's no chance that everyone is satisfied, but what did you think of the nominees as a slate this year?
It ended up matching up with what we
kind of predicted,
anticipated. Yeah. Like we said before, like 6 months ago, we weren't entirely sure what names were going to be on this final list, but we knew that just due to what has been pushed back and what's been delayed and what did finally come out, it was going to be more of a horse race between a lot of smaller movies. And like I said, I really enjoy some of the Best Picture nominees. I really like Minari. I really like Nomadland. Even Mank, I like it a lot, even though I can't recommend it to hardly anybody. And Sound of Metal, too.
Doesn't that make it a bad film if you can't recommend it to anybody?
I recommend it to myself. I totally get what you mean. Like, it doesn't have the kind of sweeping, epic Oscar vibe of some previous ceremonies. And I feel like if you go back and like maybe 10 years on and you look back at this year, are you going to be able to quickly remember what won?
That's usually how I kind of like rate these years of film, is that if you can think back to that year and you can think of, 3 really outstanding films, that's a great year for movies. 5 years from now, I don't know if we'll ever remember much of these movies other than the political statement that it made, in terms of representation. Mank getting 10 nominations was just kind of bizarre to me, but I'm not surprised. But you look at the ones that have 6 nominations: The Father, Judas and Black Messiah, Minari, Nomadland, Sound of Metal, Trial of Chicago 7. There's none of them that have, I think, a really broad audience appeal. This is not like Titanic in 1997 where like it captured a huge demographic. It's not even The Dark Knight even where it captured a huge demographic and was highly entertaining for all people.
Even though Dark Knight didn't end up getting anything it deserved.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, in retrospect, it should have been, right?
I'll never forget Hugh Jackman's opening performance. To me, one of the greatest opening monologues of any Oscars show in recent memory. And that was the year where they had like the financial crisis. So they made this extended joke about not being able to afford a fancy.
Was that the one where he had like fake Wolverine claws?
Yeah, everything was made of cardboard because the joke was that he had to put it together the night before in his garage, which is a funny idea for a bit. And I remember him astride this cardboard bat pod from The Dark Knight. And that was kind of the one little nod they made to the fact that Dark Knight was the movie that year that people felt, was one of the bigger snubs.
Right. I would guess the biggest snub, because I think after that they expanded it to 10 films.
They did, right? Yeah. There was more of an outcry.
Culturally speaking, The Dark Knight had a huge impact on the Oscars and the way we view films.
That about does it for our reaction to the Oscar nominations. We didn't get as angry or as heated as maybe we would.
Well, maybe we'll get angry when the award winners are announced.
I'm saving my anger for the Snyder Cut. That's what I'm bottling it all up for.
Okay, you can't be angry about it before going to the movie. That's just going to ruin the experience.
No, I'm joking.
Just let it wash over you. Let the hallelujah, let the Superman as Jesus Christ motifs, let Batfleck, just let it wash over you. 4 hours. Come on.
I'm not one of these Snyder Cut haters. I'm tired of that.
Are you sure you're not a hater?
I'm just tired. I've seen that movie before. I'm ready for it to be better. I know it'll be better.
Well, the early reviews came out, right? So
I know it'll be an improvement because how the hell else would it not be?
That's true. Also, that's very true.
I don't like the way that guy sees superheroes. That's my problem.
So it's not really the superhero genre. It's just the way Zack Snyder interprets things.
Yeah. I feel like he's got it wrong. He's got it all wrong, and it doesn't matter if he starts it and Joss Whedon finishes it, or if he sees it all the way through the way he's doing here. I've never seen eye to eye with that guy about this topic.
No, that's fair. I think that'll be a very interesting episode, and that'll be our next episode, won't it?
Yeah. So come on back when we post that episode. But until then, my name is Robert Snow in Toronto.
And my name is Jason Chen in Vancouver. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.